This is a relay project.
Real Talk starts right now. Here's Ryan Jespersen.
Well, it feels like a Monday in a good way on this episode of Real Talk. Glad to have you with us. It's been a few days since we've last connected, and there's been a whole lot going on. So Infamous and I have been through the weekend chomping at the bit to get to this. You've got the Prime Minister, Mark Carney, down in Calgary. Did you see him taxing somebody's Those Little Donuts? You know Those Little Donuts? You know, Those Little Donuts? Arguably one of the greatest branding exercises of all time. When you say Those Little Donuts, everybody knows exactly what you're talking about. But you saw somebody on the midway at the Calgary Stampede holding their big barrel, their bucket, I think is the preferred nomenclature, the bucket of Those Little Donuts, and the Prime Minister goes by and
props
taxed himself. He taxed the donuts.
I saw him tax that guy. Props to the Prime Minister's social team, because we knew that, first of all, props to Carney for coming out. It's a hard sell coming to Alberta. We know Carney isn't, the most liked man out here.
Remember, though, he's from Alberta.
Of course, so he has to come, right? So, he comes out, some cheers, audible boos as well. And then, of course, Pierre Poilievre's out there. He gets the big crazy, But flipping the pancakes, a little mishap there, and then this was good. This was good. These shorts with him, acting funny and people saying hey and shaking his hand.
This is great. Yeah, here he is one more time. He sees Those Little Donuts.
Yeah. But also, I thought it was pretty cool to see him and Danielle Smith, almost. What were they? Are they chummy now, Ryan?
Well, everybody wants them to get along.
Are they buddies? Some of these photos I was looking at, I was like, well, look at how, Prime Minister, how you, just some of the photos were not what you expected, right?
But this is what Calgary Stampede does.
Of course,
it brings people together. This is where deals get done. This is why all of the politicians that have any interest in the province of Alberta, in Western Canada, in oil and gas, in agriculture, have to be there. And so damn straight the Prime Minister is going to be there. And of course he's going to be meeting with the Premier of Alberta and the Mayor of Calgary and everybody else. And the interesting thing about this is that there's kind of an interesting dynamic between all of them, right? Like the Mayor of Calgary and the Premier of Alberta don't necessarily 100% get along 100% of the time, right? The Premier of Alberta and the Prime Minister obviously don't necessarily get along all the time, though everybody expects them to. You can see Edmonton's kind of sort of mayor, Amarjeet Sohi, there as well, spending some time chatting with Mark Carney as well. I say that respectfully, except for the fact that everybody knows Sohi's gone in a few months. And so he's down there, as is Tim Cartmel, who wants to be the next mayor of Edmonton. So he's hobnobbing, and everybody's doing their best to get in front of the cameras, to meet with the public and to have their performances at Stampede. And I'm talking about as, parade participants and attending the parties and attending the rodeos. They want that to resonate. They want to come across as real life. They want to come across as believable. And I think everybody wants to see the Premier and the Prime Minister getting along and having a few laughs, because their whole mandate, isn't it? Like Carney's promise to eliminate the interprovincial trade barriers. Coming up in just a quick second, we're going to talk to one of Canada's most brilliant thinkers when it comes to the economy. Todd Hirsch is going to try. I'll get his take on this as well. But the expectation is, because Carney set the bar high, that he said free trade in Canada by Canada Day.
Sure.
And then they said, well, by Canada Day, we'll have the plan in place. But people don't want to see stone walls between the Premier and the Prime Minister. That's not a good sign.
All.
But at the same time, it does play great for Danielle Smith if they're fighting a little bit, right?
Sure.
They don't want to look too chummy.
But, getting along also plays well for both of them. So, at the end of the day, I thought it was good to see this, because we haven't seen this yet. So, I agree with you. They should be getting along. They should be coming to resolutions, and they should be making things better for Alberta and all of Canada. So, it was great to finally see them, not chummy. Obviously, we know it's playing up for the cameras, but at least, cordial.
Yeah, so check this out, and I know that everyone's going to go, Jespersen spending 5 minutes on the donut video, but and there's a lot to get to. Like, meantime in Edmonton, by the way, city councilors are almost fist fighting.
Big
and so
donut guy.
We're going to get to that as
big
well.
Big donut guy.
As a matter of fact, at the Edmonton Elks game last night, shout out to the Edmonton Elks.
Big
their
win!
First win of the season.
Oh, my gosh.
I was, and time will tell, and history will prove that I stood in line for no fewer than 20 minutes to get a bucket of those little donuts. And so I speak at this from a position of authority, but I just thought this goes to show how politicians can't win, right? And I say this with a smirk on my face, but Carney has a good interaction with a guy. He crushes one of his donuts in the comments. The first comment, celebrating animal cruelty is not what I voted for. So there's one liberal voter. They're not happy that he's at the Stampede. Then you got some positive feedback. Someone says, just admire how at ease he is wherever he goes. Genuine, trustworthy. Canada, we did well. The right person for these challenging times. And then there are like 100 jokes about Carney taxing the guy's donuts, which I thought was a hilarious joke. But this is just real life, John.
I saw another comment that was like, this guy doesn't eat donuts. I was like, that's ridiculous. Also, the comments like, he's wearing a banker's suit with a cowboy hat. I mean, if he wore like a plaid shirt, he'd be getting the reverse insults that would be.
Stampede outfit.
Yeah, he'd be getting the reverse insults that he's playing dress up. So overall, I thought it was good. I thought, the cheers and boos expected, but it was nice to see him in the premiere finally sharing a laugh, whatever they were laughing about, even if it was a little faked.
Yeah, there's that Stephen Harper Stampede outfit that went sideways back in the day. You got to be careful with the cowboy cosplay, right? And there's got to be handlers.
The hat's important. You got to get the right hat.
The hat is
critical. You can't just have your head of PR or whoever bring you one. You got to try it on before.
You go to, and this shout out is for free. This is to a family that I grew up with, and a wonderful family. You go to Lamley's Western Wear, and you walk in.
Oh, yeah.
And you tell them where you're going to be, the types of parties you're going to be attending. They're going to know right away. You don't have to clarify that you're not participating in the rodeo. The team at Lamley's will already know this from the minute you walk in.
Well, measure your head.
You're going to say, I cannot have anything that looks like Woody from Toy Story. I cannot be out there looking like Howdy Doody.
This hat is just
trying to get deals done, right?
This guy.
You got to be careful when you dress up Western, but when you nail it, and I think everybody listening to the show has at least one friend that was at the Stampede from Thursday to Sunday. They're dragging their asses back to wherever they're going today.
Yeah.
And they're getting back there, but we've all seen them showing off their fits. They say the Stampede fits, the outfits you've put together. And whether or not you nailed it. And
I give Carney's hat a 8.5 out of 10. I think this was well fitted.
That's a classic.
Him.
That's a classic. That's a classic spectator's hat. If you want to show, you had some shots of him with Danielle Smith. Danielle Smith's her fit's very strong as well this weekend. But if you're the premier of Alberta, you better be nailing your Stampede fits. And so I think that they both did a pretty good job here. We did reference an absolute meltdown in Edmonton City Council chambers on Friday after we had signed off, and we will get to that today. Plus, we have a really solid email from an audience member, Gillian, who wants to take on that story about Lia Thomas. She was the University of Pennsylvania swimmer, a trans athlete that has had her records wiped. We talked about that last week. This is something that Donald Trump's been pushing for. Gillian's written in a really thoughtful email that I wanted to share with you all, and then Pilot One is going to bring us home with the positive reflection today. But in our feature interview presented by our friends at Mercedes-Benz Edmonton West, we got to dig into this. Todd Hirsch, renowned economist, special to the Globe and Mail. The headline reads, to up defense spending, which is coming. Carney made that promise in Kananaskis. He made it before, but now they're talking about 5% of GDP spent on military to meet NATO obligations to keep the United States happy. Todd says Canada must cut deeper, tax harder, and borrow more all at once. And Todd, as we welcome you back to Real Talk, I don't have to tell you when you start saying cut deeper, tax harder, borrow more, it's going to make a lot of people uncomfortable.
It's making me uncomfortable, even the fact that I wrote that. But it's the tough reality that we're facing in Canada.
So why don't we let's get into this at first. We for a long time, when Donald Trump was first elected president, and throughout his first term as president, he quite rightfully was holding Canada to a minimum military spend. This was a commitment made by NATO members to spend a minimum of 2% of GDP on military. Canada wasn't even meeting the 2%, and now we're talking about 5. How big of a difference or how big of a stretch are we talking about here?
Well, it's a little bit of a slippery number to determine because it's 5% of GDP. And, if the year we're trying to make it by is 2030 or 2035, I forget which number, but it's approximately $50 billion extra that we need to come up with. And just for some context for viewers, 50 billion represents about a 10% increase in everything that Ottawa spends at the moment. So it is a sizable increase in government spending. Now, lots of people could say, well, we haven't, as citizens, we haven't had a debate on whether we should be doing this or not. And I think that's fair to say. On the other hand, the Prime Minister has committed us to it. Generally, from the polls I see, Canadians understand the need to do this. We have not been a good NATO participant. The world in 2025, unfortunately, is a different world than it was in 1995 when spending on military maybe didn't seem as important. So, I mean, there's a lot to unpack there, but at the bottom, at the end of it, the Prime Minister has committed Canada to roughly $50 billion in increased spending on military. That's a lot of money.
Yeah, I mean, that's like roughly I mean, not quite, but it's roughly like the entire budget for the province of Alberta for an entire year, right?
Yeah,
like to
almost
give
exactly.
Give people a general idea.
Alberta's a little bit more, but
little bit more.
So this isn't change we can find in the back of the couch cushions,
right?
And this is real money that has to come from somewhere. So that's what this column in the Globe, and I had another one previous. About 2 weeks ago, sort of on the same topic. The question is, so let's have an adult conversation about where this money comes from. And are there ways we can be creative about it? And that's where I really tried to lean into this article is, are there some ways we can do this outside of maybe the traditional, we're going to just jack up income tax, or we're going to, eliminate the CBC and Parks Canada and the correctional systems and everything else that we need to pay for.
Yeah, Todd Hirsch, our guest, if you're watching on the Real Talk live stream presented by California Closet, Super Chat Ken says it's simply unfair to pass more debt onto our kids and grandkids. Nobody likes taxes, but we need to be realistic. Kenzie says realistic cuts in spending would be better. I mean, let's say you do acknowledge that spending cuts have to happen. You say Canada's got to cut deeper. Hey, even the adverbs, Todd, are good. Cut deeper, tax harder, borrow more. Although I guess more is not an adverb. I digress. But you take my point. You're painting a picture here. So we're starting with spending cuts, or at least take us into the approach here. What did you consider and then take off the table in putting together your plan?
Well, so the first piece that I wrote about 2.5 weeks ago was arguing there's not a lot of room to cut spending. People tend to think, there's easy $50 billion in waste in the federal bureaucracy. And I know it's fashionable to talk about that. The reality is it's just not true. 80% of what Ottawa spends is transfers to either provinces or individuals. And yes, that includes Alberta. So there's the Canada Health Transfer. It's money that is transferred from Ottawa per capita to all 10 provinces to help finance healthcare costs. There's the Canada Education Transfer. There is equalization, which is a landmine, I know, especially in this province, but it's there. There are old age security payments to seniors. There is employment insurance. There are transfers to the territorial government. And once you also add on top of that debt payment or debt servicing, that's about another $50 billion. You can't touch those things without really inflaming either the provinces or senior citizens. No one wants that. So once you get rid of all of those transfers, you get down to what we would call operating spending, or what we might call discretionary spending. Things that Ottawa spends on that you could possibly look at cutting. Now we're down to about $90 billion. That also includes the stuff we're currently spending on military, which I guess if we're trying to get to 50 billion, we're not going to cut military to increase it.
Right.
So there's not a lot about, $90 billion. Try to find 50 billion of savings in 90 billion. you could completely get rid of the CBC. And maybe that's a conversation people, should be having. I'm not in favor of it, but I understand the rationale. You could get rid of that. That gets you 1 billion, a little more, of the 50 billion that you need. So let's keep cutting. You could get rid of the entire Canada Parks National Park system.
Right.
I don't think anyone wants that to happen. That gets you about another $500 million. You could get rid of Canada Post. You could get rid of all the judiciary. You could get rid of the correctional institutions. For one thing, it's very foolish to think that we're even going to do that. And none of this moves the needle that much. So this piece, I said, how about we sort of break some taboos? And how about we talk about cuts to old age security and cuts to transfers to provinces and territories and cuts to equalization? This is where people are really going to light their hair on fire.
Yeah, understandably,
said,
right?
If we do a across the board 1%, so you're shaving off the top, 1% cut to everybody. The only thing you can't actually cut is debt service payments. Those have to be paid. So we're down to about $450 billion, a 1% cut to everything, no exceptions. Everyone is going to share some of the pain, including seniors, including have-not provinces, including territories. That gets us about $5 billion of the 50 we need.
Hey, Todd, can I also just point out, courtesy of your piece, we're talking to Todd Hirsch. You can read his work at theglobeandmail.com. We'll link to it in the show notes on the podcast and on the YouTube episode. I've never seen this number actually presented in print, or at least I haven't been paying close enough attention. Our the interest on our debt annually is $49 billion. The interest?
Yep. That's just interest. And that, could go up as we continue to borrow more.
Right. So there's no options there whatsoever.
It sounds like a big number, but once we compare ourselves to our American neighbors and other G7 countries, it puts it in context. It's a huge number for Canada, but we're actually in a relatively good standing compared to the others. I don't know if that's much comfort or not. It should be maybe a little bit. But yeah, we have to recognize that Canada, we borrowed a lot of money. We went heavily into debt during the financial crisis when Stephen Harper was, and for good reason. COVID happens. We piled on even more debt for good reasons. We had to do it. And now we are, we're looking at this mountain of debt, and that debt needs to be serviced. We need to pay interest on that debt.
Yeah. So I want to recognize you're obviously a renowned economist. You're an author. You're a public speaker. Not a political scientist, but you've always done a wonderful job on this show and on other platforms of understanding the political factors at play when it comes to the application of these economic theories or these economic game plans, right? So when you talk about, a 1% spending cut across the board, how important is it to you, or how important do you think it would be to this federal government to ensure that there are no exceptions? You can't start introducing exceptions if you're doing something right. You describe this as the shared sacrifice plan, and that I think is integral to it for it to fly politically.
Well, it's hard to argue against everyone has to give up a little bit, no exceptions. And this is, and you're right, I'm not a political analyst or a scientist. I'm an economist. Economics is adjacent, of course, to political science. But, for the prime minister to say everyone has to dig a little bit, 1% cut, can we manage that? Because then you get around, playing favorites, saying, well, we're going to cut old age security by less than that. We're going to cut, provincial transfers to provinces for education. Then you're now making judgments that Canadians never really had a say on. But a 1% cut, can we all manage that? Is it a small enough cut? It's a sacrifice for sure. People aren't going to be happy about it. But we also have to remember, every year the spending goes up, at least by inflation, probably a little bit more. So, if a program was going to get a 3% increase, well, now it's only going to get a 2% increase. That's sort of what that 1% cut amounts to. So very few of these numbers would actually go down in absolute terms. They would only go up 1% less than they would normally be going up. So, is that a fair compromise? Is that a shared sacrifice that, all Canadians and provinces and recipients of government transfers and checks in the mail, can they all accept a 1% cut?
You talk on kind of your second of these three pillars. You talk about as you know, cut deeper, tax harder, spend more, closing the tax gap. I was surprised, and I just one of the reasons why we reached out to you, Todd, is I learned like 10 things by reading your column, which is a huge compliment to you, I hope. But up to $23 billion in taxes uncollected every single year in Canada. So if you're someone that's been evading taxes, although perhaps maybe there's some honest mistakes, we'll give folks the benefit of the doubt. CRA rarely extends the benefit of the doubt, I don't think. But take us into this. I mean, $23 billion, that's not peanuts.
Well, you know, and for this one, I have to credit a sharp-eyed reader of my original Globe piece. His name is Timothy. I don't know him, but he reached out to me on LinkedIn, and he pointed out, he said, hey, you know, rather than increasing the tax rate on individuals, you know, like maybe raising the GST, which no one wants, or, you know, income tax, he pointed out that Canada Revenue Agency, and it's on their website, you can go and look at it. They actually released a report, and now this was from 2021. So I think the numbers are probably even bigger now, but they report that they estimate 7 to 9% of all taxes are actually not collected. This could be people, you know, unethically evading taxes or not paying taxes or, you know, outright cheating. It could be people just making mistakes and not claiming income that they, you know, didn't know about, or, you know, in other words, honest errors. It is also things like bankruptcies. You know, a company goes out of business and they're owed money. Well, CRA is probably not going to, you know, be able to collect some of that. So all of this untaxed revenue sitting out there. The CRA estimates that it could be as high as $23 billion every year. So I'm suggesting, well, why don't we have a closer look at that tax gap, this untaxed revenue that's sitting out there. Even if we were to collect half of it, that could be 10 or $12 billion in additional revenue without having to increase taxes on people who are already paying. In other words, we don't have to increase the tax rate. We just have to, I guess, metaphorically squeeze the lemon a little bit harder to get a bit more of that tax juice out there that is already legitimately owed to Ottawa.
In our Real Talk live chat, powered by Park Power, got a couple of interesting points on that. You know, anytime you're talking about national debt, Todd, you're going to get some strong takes, which I welcome. Darren says the value you get from the investment of borrowing that money just has to be higher, right? He says if you grow the economy or tax income by more than the cost of servicing the debt, it was the right choice. Meantime, Greg says not a single word about debt repayment. Need to know more? That from Greg. So it's like, obviously, you think governments have got to have a plan for knocking down the debt. How does that factor into this? Obviously, Greg's making a good point. If you can find an extra 30, 40, 50 billion dollars, wouldn't it be nice to knock down the principal on what you're paying?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, in the ultimate world, or I guess the utopia world we love to live in, is sort of where everyone hammers their swords into and, you know, we don't have to spend all this money on military. That's the ideal world. It's not the world we're living in. It's not realistic. I hate the idea of piling on more debt. I hate the idea of, you know, having to pay more in taxes, even if it's money that's already owed. And I really don't want cuts to my mother's old age security or Alberta's Canada Health Trans. I don't want any of this. No one wants any of this. But we have to be pragmatic. This is the world we're in. The recommendation I put on debt, you know, is why don't we bring back the idea of the victory bonds that, you know, Canadians dug into during the Second World War. These victory bonds were very specific, borrowing from the federal government, from Canadians. It's still debt. Let me be clear about that. You can call it whatever you want, a rose by any other name. So it's still debt, but by issuing, and we could call it, you know, we could be fun with this. We could call it the elbows up bonds. We could call it the Keep Canada Sovereign bonds.
I like that.
We could call it whatever we want. But if it was a specific debt issued, allowing Canadians to participate in this, and it would have to pay, you know, a reasonably competitive return, an interest rate return. Is it a way of borrowing, maybe with some purpose and intention, and allowing Canadians to understand this is the situation we're in? We all have to sacrifice. We're going to all pitch in and, lend some of our money to the federal government so we can get through this. The only thing I worry about is, the victory bonds during the war lasted for the war. That was the specific, and everyone, probably in 1942, it didn't feel like this, but, the war ended and then all that spending stops. Our world is a little different. We're not in a war, not at the moment. We're ramping up military spending. And there may not be a defined end to when that military spending, comes down. So borrowing in this case, if we call it the elbows up bonds, I think there is maybe something creative we could do, because it's at least allowing Canadians the opportunity to sort of mentally and emotionally participate in what we're going through right now as a country. And that is some existential, some anxiety about, where does our country fit into this new global, this geopolitical landscape? I
like calling them freedom bonds. Freedom. The word freedom just gets people.
Well,
going.
Yeah, it sounds.
Although it kind of sounds like you're going in the wrong direction. But that's the part I love about it. You could call them the big beautiful bond, and everybody could invest in the big beautiful bond. Wouldn't that be fantastic? Okay, so pillar number 3. Debt with a purpose. And respectfully to Greg, who wants to see more debt repayment, commenting here in our live chat, you're saying that the final prong of this plan has to be borrowing more.
Well, because that $50 billion number is so daunting, I don't think there is any one pillar alone you can lean on. I just don't think you can find $50 billion in savings in cuts to other programs. Because like I said, we're down to $90 billion in discretionary income. I don't think we can do it. You're going to break too many systems in order to do that. I don't think Canadians can afford $50 billion in more taxes, especially right now. Too many people, and everyone understands this. We're all strained under higher grocery bills, and the economy feels precarious, and we've got 7% unemployment in Canada. And, now is not the time to, massively increase taxes to the tune of $50 billion in additional taxes. I don't think we can add $50 billion to our growing mountain of debt. It's unsustainable. We're going to start to hit some credit rating drops if we, pile on that debt. There's no easy way out of this. So that's why my approach, I really do believe it needs to be a 3-pronged approach. No single bucket is sufficient in its own. And like I've always told my public finance students, I used to teach public finance at U Calgary years ago. There's only 3 ways governments can generate an additional dollar of revenue. You can cut from something else, you can increase taxes on somebody, or you can borrow it. When people say, I'm going to get emails and say, oh, the government can print money. No, the government can't print money. Take my public finance class. That's not an option they have available to them. That's the Bank of Canada's role. The best they could do is ask the Bank of Canada to print more money, and the federal government can go ahead and borrow some of this money. We're back to borrowing and adding debt. The government of Canada has no printing press in the basement of Parliament, which people think they do. So we need some education how public finance actually works. Printing money is not an option available to Ottawa.
Todd, let me ask you this. Just grateful for your time. We often hear folks just like you. Sometimes it is you warning against, dings to the credit rating. Or we hear like Alberta was like losing its or at risk of losing its AAA credit rating, that type of idea. I've never been 100% clear on why that exactly matters. Is it either access to capital or is it higher interest rates? It's not just that we're worried about what people are going to think about us. There's got to be a bottom line issue.
Well, there is reputation that actually, but it is sort of both of those things. So if your credit rating drops, it's the same thing with an individual. If your credit rating as an individual starts to deteriorate, you might have a harder time getting a car loan. The bank might shake you down a little harder for that mortgage. You might end up paying a little bit of a higher interest rate. If you're a federal government like Canada, the number of available sources of borrowing might dwindle because there's a lot of institutional money out there that is required to only be into something that is AAA rated. If it's BB plus rated, which is not a good rating, a lot of those institutions, by their own policies and regulations, aren't even allowed to lend to you if you don't have a credit rating at a certain level. So it is both available funds that you have to borrow, and it also could be higher interest rates because you are showing that you're a little bit of a riskier take.
Yeah. Plain Power says we just need a higher tax rate for individuals earning over $500,000 annually, corporations earning over $2 million. That's always been. I mean, that's kind of been a common theme in conversation, not just in Canada. I mean, all over the world, people essentially boiled down to it: tax the rich, right? And I don't know that any politician. Yeah.
And I know it's popular for people who aren't rich to say tax the rich. You could tax them really high. It doesn't move the needle as much as people think it's going to move it. That's the problem.
Yeah.
And I'm not necessarily against higher taxes on higher income earners. But we also live in a world where these people have very creative accountants. And I'm not suggesting they're doing anything unethical. But they have ways of minimizing how much they're going to pay anyway.
For sure.
And a lot of that means that money, that capital moves somewhere else. It's not illegal. It's not unethical. It is an accounting practice or a procedure. These people have high-powered and very knowledgeable accountants who know how to minimize that. So again, it's just a little bit naive to say we're just going to jack up interest or taxes on super rich people and we're going to solve the problem.
Yeah.
It doesn't really solve.
Yeah,
it can help.
I don't have permission to speak for this business, so I won't name them. But I spoke to a business owner like no longer than 2 weeks ago, who was telling me about the process of essentially uprooting. They moved a massive agricultural operation, a brand name that everybody would know. Anybody that goes grocery shopping would know this brand. Proudly based in Alberta, and they moved their entire operation. Todd built a massive new warehouse less than a kilometer away to a different county because of a demonstrable difference in property taxes. And I thought that you can never underestimate what a business will do to protect its bottom line, to protect its profits. It's what has to happen. And you got to be careful. You got to make these tactical, well thought out moves if you're going to do anything that could impact large amounts of capital going either way, right? Like, to say the least.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Hey, thanks for doing this, Todd. We always appreciate your insights. Folks can check out your piece to Up Defense Spending Canada Must Cut Deeper, Tax Harder, and Borrow More all at once at theglobeandmail.com. If you'd love to hear more from Todd, if you'd like to book him to speak to your organization, you can check out toddhirsch.com. And, of course, this feature interview presented by our friends at Mercedes-Benz Edmonton West. Todd, thanks for doing this, my man. Have a great rest of your summer.
Thanks, Ryan. You too. Good to talk to you.
Yeah, you as well. Todd Hirsch. I want to spend more time here in the live chat. A lot of people talking about the artwork hanging behind Todd. I like that. That's resonating with you. Gizmo says you got to tax, when it comes to taxing corporations, the rich live off loans secured by their businesses. They don't necessarily have a salary per se. It's the business you need to tax. Sure. And also, by the way, I'm not an economist. I'm not a tax strategist. I'm just a guy. So take it for what it's worth. But if you look, Johnny, one of the things that Alberta is very proud of and should be proud of, one of the things that Alberta politicians reference very often, business leaders as well, is the Alberta advantage. And, you'll have some debate across the country of how significant that Alberta advantage is. I do believe that it exists. I'm also born and raised Albertan, so take that for what it's worth. But one of the big things that we crow about is our relatively low corporate taxes.
Yeah.
And so now you're talking. Now we're talking. Federal. Obviously, the conversation we're having here with Todd is federal. But once you start implementing significant increases to personal or corporate taxes. That's something that obviously sends a message to the rest of the world. Canada is certainly not the highest tax nation, but it's definitely not the lowest. It's on the higher side of the ledger, and I think you got to be careful with stuff like that. Like Mark Carney's coming in. It feels like it kind of rolls off the tongue now, Prime Minister Mark Carney. It took a while to get used to that. You had 10 years of Trudeau, you had 10 years of Harper before that. But still, people don't know Carney that well, right? If you had to say what's he all about, or what's sort of how's he wired, or how is he different than his predecessor, people are still kind of getting a feel for that. And so if one of his first big moves, you commit to spending up to 5% of your GDP on military, and then your next big move is to crank up everybody's taxes and cut all the social programs. I mean, I recognize Les into our super chat, Les who's obviously been a loud advocate for people with disabilities. Les says cut OAS, so he's talking about obviously old age security. What the hell? He says these folks are already in poverty, and Les isn't wrong. And I don't think that's lost on Todd as well, talking about you got to make cuts across the board, 1% to every program, if you're going to make it fair. Everybody can make a compelling argument that they're not the ones that should be cut, right?
Of course, yeah. I do agree with you about the Alberta advantage, though. I think it absolutely exists. I know people in Ontario, people in BC who've moved back. I did it. I moved to BC and I moved back, and one of the reasons is the low taxes or whatever. So I'm and I've been living that. We've all been living that glorious low tax life. No PST life here in Alberta for a while. So I'm not adverse to raising taxes a little bit, or, 1%, 2%, 3%, whatever, as long as they're going to the right place. And I don't know, military spending is really the thing I wanted to go to. But I mean, I agree with Todd. Like, where does this money come from? Because this is a lot of money. And like he said, there's only two things you can do. You can cut, or you can raise taxes. So it'll be interesting to see what Mark Carney actually does.
Yeah, Tommy Temper, good to see you, Tommy, says the problem is Mark Carney is spending like crazy with absolutely no talk about where the money's coming from.
That's what you do, though, when you get elected. You spend some money, right?
Yeah, says borrowing probably high debt interest payments, making Canada a poor country. I don't know. I will say this. A lot of people will criticize Mark Carney. I mean, his critics loudest about the things like he's wearing banker suits. Like, yeah, he's a banker. He was the governor of two national banks. I think, let me just say this. I'm not carrying water for Carney. I'm just saying, if there's one thing the guy has done and can do, it's like understand economics and understand business, understand commerce. Like he's, there's a lot of Brookfield comments in the chat.
Yeah,
let's just say, let's let the banker have a crack at it. Everybody was bitching.
Yeah, why
and when I say everybody, I'm using the word everybody a lot, but a lot of people are bitching. We got the drama teacher as the prime minister. Make Trudeau a drama teacher again. Well, now
he's overqualified.
Now you got like the C-suite business exec. Now
what
you
do
got
you want?
the former governor of the Bank of Canada in there. So
you know what I think we should do? We should go to what Star Trek did. And just everyone who's in politics wears the same outfit.
Yeah.
They just have a different badge or flag denoting their stance or stature on the ladder, and that's it. And then nobody can complain.
Yeah. Dubious. By the way, Dubious says working out at camp this week, so listening to the show, live streaming on the Mixler audio app, Dubious. We appreciate that. Says military spending is probably smart, to be honest. We're on the brink of war. When Trump finishes war with his own people in a little bit here. If you missed our July 4th episode with my cousin Philip down in Los Angeles, make sure you check that out. Really interesting on the ICE raids. M. Aitken says a sales tax, a GST, is paid by everyone, even visitors. In other words, I think the implication there is maybe you could increase a sales tax. I've always thought, this is something I've said, if you've listened to my radio show for a long time, I think a flat income tax combined with a sales tax is an astute way to do it. I know not everybody agrees. I was gobsmacked. Nay, Johnny, I was outraged.
Jeez.
When I heard
the vocabulary today.
That visitors to Canada. Did you know this? And I don't even know if this policy still exists or not. visitors to Canada could apply for a rebate or a refund of the GST that they paid when they were here. What the hell are we doing?
Yeah.
We're giving the visitors, we're drawing them here. We're drawing them to experience Canadian tourism, and then we're giving them back the tax money that they paid us so our citizens can lift heavier loads. It makes absolutely no sense.
Well, the businesses still reap the benefits, so.
Yeah. I don't know. Let us know what you think to talk@ryanjespersen.com. That's where you can send us an email anytime.
That's the Canadian advantage there, Ryan.
Yeah.
To people coming here.
Get your GST back. I can't believe that. Super Chat goes on to say, Super Chat Ken says the Alberta advantage is a relative short-term political tool. that does not responsibly address future generations says we've only had that advantage by spending royalties instead of saving them. Ken's probably not wrong on that. Gizmo says Canada's corporate taxes are lower than America's. We can pick on corporate. I mean, politicians don't want to use that word. We can pick on corporations more than we do. Maybe, but also don't underestimate the willingness of the ability. Like I was saying with that ag company, I won't name them because they didn't volunteer to be used as a case study. But like businesses will move, right? I mean, like they'll move across the street to go from Edmonton to Leduc County, or wherever you're going, or they'll move. They'll move from the States to Canada, Canada to the States, Canada to Europe, wherever, if it suits their purposes. And like Todd said, the rich, the wealthy, they've got the best accountants and lawyers in the world. So it's not like they're like evading taxes, like I'm trying to think of like the highest profile athlete who's been nailed for evading taxes. There's a lot of them in the tens of millions. Mm-hmm. It's not this. It's all legal. It's all gray area, but it's legal.
It's a very gray area.
But they'll find ways to get around it. Yeah. The rich are rich for a reason.
Of course they are.
Right? I'm not saying we don't look for equity. We don't look for fair policy here. But, to be honest with you, it's going to be a lot easier for somebody that's worth a few $1 million, obviously, to swallow a 1% cut in whatever sort of spending might influence them, right? The national parks budget sees a 1% cut. Gosh, would you hate for that to be in monitoring, as we recognize just this tragedy that's been it's an active situation as we speak down in Texas, these horrific floods, and people are talking. I mean, the death count here, the fatalities that are heartbreaking, in the dozens, including many young children at camps. And what are people talking about? The fact that environmental monitoring budgets, that weather monitoring tools have been cut over the past short while, and whether or not that's entirely relevant to the advance warnings that either did or didn't happen, to the understanding of how quickly that river was swelling. You heard that river, they said in under an hour, the water level rose in that particular river in Texas by up to 8 meters.
Yeah,
we're talking like 25 feet.
Yeah, some of the videos are crazy, but at the same time, I'm watching these videos being like, this is, in our day and age, that's the detriment right there, is that you should be getting out of the area, not videotaping the fact that the water level is rising so fast.
I think
couldn't believe people were videotaping it.
I think people underestimated it. Like, you just don't think it's going to happen that fast. And it's wild. My point being, when you start talking about, we're going to cut the national parks budget by 1%, where's that going to be? We're going to cut the CBC's budget by 1%. John and I have worked in the business for a long time. I guarantee I could find you places you could cut 1% there. I'm not saying that they're fat cats, but I'm saying 1% is no big deal. But if you're starting to talk about people on fixed incomes, right, people that are paying more than ever, depending on what their coverage looks like for prescription meds, folks living in poverty, folks that are doing their best just to get by, folks that are relying on all these social programs, and you start talking about a 1% cut, 1%, 2%, 3% here and there is a huge deal. $20 a month for someone is a throwaway. It's a joke. You spend that much on $6.49 tickets, $20 a month. Doesn't matter. For somebody else, $20 a month is a big, huge deal. It's like, can they have milk in the fridge that month, right? So you got to consider all this stuff, and ultimately, this is going to be the politicians that figure it out. But I sure appreciate Todd's insights into that through our feature interview presented by our friends at Mercedes-Benz Edmonton West, and you're going to be hearing more about them. We're very excited about this new partnership. We also want to recognize our other sponsors that make this conversation possible. Before we get into the brouhaha at Edmonton City Hall, this was an absolutely wild development. I want to focus our attention for a quick second on North Road Investment Council. These are our friends at northroadic.com. Summer, this time of year, is a time when a lot of successful Canadians, and I know a lot of you are going to be listening with Todd Hirsch on the show, you're going to pause and reflect on your career and your retirement goals. And at North Road Investment Council, they're working with Canadians who have done just that, built really successful careers, and you now want to ensure that your wealth is being organized to deliver a successful retirement. So the typical client here has about $2 million in investable assets, comes from like an analytical or detail-driven profession, like an engineer, an architect, maybe a dentist. If that sounds like you, the team at North Road would love to open a conversation with you. You can check out their website, northroadic.com, and get that conversation started, built on clarity, discipline, and true alignment. Oh man, this weekend had an unbelievable family barbecue. I know I was talking a lot about that Instagram video I post, Johnny, of those chicken thighs. I've never had so many people send me messages how enthusiastic they are about their favorite barbecue protein. We had a really great debate on what is the most underrated grilled meat on planet Earth. The most underrated. I'm going with chicken thighs. Real Talkers, you can let me know to talk@ryanjespersen.com. If you're going to be entertaining family, friends, maybe you're heading out of town, you're going to be going camping, or you're just going to get the grill going in your own backyard. Nobody knows grilling like the butchers at Friesen Brothers. And all that protein that they're going to be talking to you about is coming from right here in Alberta. Pork, chicken, beef, even bison, all of it proudly from Alberta, just like Friesen Brothers, celebrating their 70th anniversary this year. Alberta grown and Alberta owned. Our friends at California Closets of Canada want to remind you how proud they are to be manufacturing all of their installations right here in Alberta. You know, the California Closets journey all starts with a free design consultation where you can learn more about their approach to design and, of course, the bigger picture, the installation, the lifetime guarantee. You can do that all. Book your free consultation at californiaclosets.ca. Learn more about what they can do in the secondary bedrooms with those Murphy beds, maybe the primary bedrooms with a walk-in closet, even your dream garage. California Closets of Canada does it all, custom designed to fit your space and your budget at californiaclosets.ca. And a quick note to those of you who are looking to reinvent yourself, whether that's just for your own personal knowledge or for a competitive job market, Athabasca University, Canada's open university, doesn't take the summer off. As a matter of fact, their online offerings, their world-class accredited online degrees and courses are designed so you can complete your education wherever and whenever it works for you. So that means while they just celebrated the class of 2025 with Convocation, amazing stories on their Instagram, by the way. I encourage you to check it out. They'll still have students working through the summer because that's what works for them. That's just one of the AU advantages. You can learn more about it at athabascau.ca. Oh my gosh, Jordan in our live chat says grilled pineapple, fantastic on the barbecue.
It's actually,
amen.
Have you ever had grilled pineapple?
I have.
It's.
I've had it on ice cream.
I don't know why
actually.
it makes it so much better. It's incredible.
I don't actually know. I'm kind of talking out of my ass a tiny little bit, but I think it has something to do with caramelizing the sugars.
Yeah.
I think that something happens to like the exterior. Pineapple might be one of the most underrated things on planet Earth.
My one friend who is unapologetic. Can you say it for me?
You can do it unapologetically? Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
Unhealthy. Says that it's because you take the vitamins out. Like, because you know when you cook things, you lose the enzymes, you lose a lot of the vitamins. So like, I try to eat like fruit and veggies, you know, at least half of them raw during the week. And he's always like, yeah, but it tastes better when you take the vitamins out.
Yeah, I think Jordan seems like they know, and on the chat is also saying that rolled or rather pineapple pork, they're saying, on the barbecue is kind of So Jordan, first of all, to talk@ryanjespersen.com, this is only for selfish purposes. Please send us the recipe. Please let me know how to make it because I'd love to do it. Like, do you do the pineapple and the pork together, or I imagine you do it side by side?
Yeah.
Probably you do the pork, you do the pineapple, you combine them when they're all done.
You know what's even crazier is putting a little hot honey on the
pineapple.
Brother. I know someone that did that, and I was like, I must try this. That
sounds absolutely fantastic. This, I know what's going to happen here is this is just going to turn into like a full-on foodie takeover of our live chat.
Don't do this to us before breakfast, guys.
Why do we do this to ourselves when there's nothing that we can do about it? Our stomachs are grumbling, and we're going to torture ourselves.
We've got bigger fish to fry, and that's not a slight at Sarah because I love her. But let's get into this.
Okay, so here's the deal, and I think like everybody, probably anybody in the province of Alberta, although like we recognize like. Half the folks have been like tipsy at Stampede for like 5 straight days. So maybe this story has not made the rounds, but I think so. If you're a politician and something goes sideways, you want it to go sideways exactly when this one did, which is 5 p.m. on Friday, because there's kind of a few days for things to sort themselves out. The public is on their way to their weekend. They're on their way to their camp spots. They've just taken in the Stampede Parade. They're not paying attention, but a development at Edmonton City Hall involving a very good friend of the show, by the way, kind of caught fire, to say the least. I was out playing golf with some buddies, Johnny, and my phone just started buzzing.
Oh, man, I was I didn't want to bug you because it was a weekend, but I was like, he already knows.
I thought when I heard what had gone down, that Edmonton City Councillor Sarah Hamilton, wonderful friend of this show, had gone like double F-bombs in council chambers, I thought there's got to be more to this story. We're going to play the audio for you. Obviously, this show, we kind of run and gun. We're independent. We're streaming online, and so you're going to hear some salty language from time to time. This is just your heads up if the kids are in the room or tuning in. We're not going to bleep it out because, well, we're all adults, and I think you should hear what was said. But the clock is nearing 5 p.m. on Friday. This is like a few days ago. And councillors are debating whether they're going to delay the beginning of their summer break so they can finish a public hearing into the zoning bylaw. And the zoning bylaw is a big deal. It's a huge deal, as a matter of fact, for a number of different reasons, and we've talked about that on the show before, and we'll continue to talk about it, but it's been very contentious in Edmonton, and it's particularly, I think, important for some folks, for many folks, to have resolution on this, to have a decision from council on this, because there are people that have made investments, there's people that are sitting on properties deciding whether or not they're going to buy or sell, there's people that maybe have projects, either maybe not shovels in the ground, but they're either deciding whether or not they're going to deploy their own capital. You get the idea. Neighborhoods are trying to figure out what the dynamic's going to look like. How is this zoning bylaw going to play out? And so this motion passes ultimately. I mean, that's kind of the end of the story on that front by a 9-4 vote, but there was some tense debate. Sarah Hamilton was one of those councillors, along with Tim Cartmel, Jennifer Rice, and Karen Principe, who voted against continuing this debate. Why? Because they had family vacation plans. They said that they had trips booked, two councillors in particular, Cartmel, who's running for mayor, as you know, and Sarah Hamilton. They said they weren't sure if they would have internet connections to be able to remotely attend a continuation on Tuesday, that's the day after today, of this public hearing. And that's when Councillor Joanne Wright jumps in. We're going to play the audio in just a second. And Joanne Wright basically says that, well, she's kind of surprised that her fellow colleagues, that incumbent councillors, ones that have been there for a while, don't have scheduling buffers, like that they've planned their vacations. They're planning to depart for vacation right when council was supposed to end. Kind of, she says they should have known better. And that's when all hell breaks loose. The first voice you're going to hear is Councillor Joanne Wright. The second voice you're going to hear unmistakably is Councillor Sarah Hamilton.
Oh, I can only speak to it. Okay, so I will be voting in favor. From what I understand from Mr. Pollock from earlier this week, this is a normal course of business with things ramping up, and I would think that maybe the incumbents would have been aware of that. I wasn't, but I've been able to adjust my schedule for the most part. I will have to step away.
Point of order. That was so rude, Mr. Mayor. That was so fucking rude. Fuck you, Joanne Wright. Fuck you.
This is absolutely unacceptable.
I know.
Okay. So this is the audio that we have. So your first thought when you heard it?
I thought, is Sarah having a bad day? That's all I thought. Because I think people, you have a bad morning, you have whatever. And I think she immediately knew that she made a mistake. It was a little unacceptable, but I mean, you said this before. You want politicians to be passionate. So what do you think?
Yeah. So I've got a number of thoughts on this.
It was a little like we went from like 2 to 10 in like a second, right?
Yeah, can you play it one more time? I just want to hear it one more time because listen to the words that Joanne Wright says, and then you tell me if you okay. So listen to what she says. Like it's a little passive aggressive.
Of course it is.
Yeah, it's passive aggressive, but it's politics, right? So let's hear it one more time.
Oh, I can only speak to it. Okay, so I will be voting in favor. From what I understand from Mr. Pollock from earlier this week, this is a normal course of business with things ramping up, and I would think that maybe the incumbents would have been aware of that. I wasn't, but I've been able to adjust my schedule for the most part. I will have to step away.
Point of order. That was so rude, Mr. Mayor. That was so fucking rude. Fuck you, Joanne Wright. Fuck you.
Okay, and then the mayor goes on to say,
this
like, it's
is
unacceptable, and obviously,
absolutely-
like...
Which he's right, but
Absolutely unacceptable.
it's just, I'm sorry to laugh there, but like,
Well, no, it is. It's okay. Like, people are going to feel very differently. Like, some
things
people will be-
escalated quickly.
I don't know that I would say this is funny. Like, it's not funny. But I don't think this is like horrible and deplorable and like whatever. I think
but
it's like
she could have
somewhere
just
in the
said
middle.
that's fucking rude and end it. But she
Well,
went
or-
with the fuck you
Well,
afterwards.
just even the F-bomb. Like, I would say this. Like, you know. Okay, here I've got a million thoughts. What I'm honestly doing is just watching the live chat.
Oh,
because
yeah.
this is. I love you guys. I love having the live chat here because when I want to know where people are landing on something, I come in here. So Emily gets credit. Emily had the very first comment, and Emily just says, "Whoa." Okay. Gizmo says that is not the kind of chatter for a meeting. Tony says, poor Sohi. Tommy says, I think she's been watching Donald Trump. Gillian says, seriously, there's got to be something else going on. John, who's watching us on Facebook, what's up, John, says that counselor is classless. Lauren says, you can't say it, but I agree. Goose says an unacceptable outburst from a very entitled friend of this show. She continues to not impress me. Alberta Girl says, I've heard this clip over a dozen times, and Sarah overreacted. M. Aitken says, very unprofessional, but I'm sure she was very emotional in that moment. So Darren says there's got to be more going on in the background here.
100%.
So I reached out to Sarah. Okay, you guys know Sarah Hamilton's been on the show many times. She's a personal friend of mine. Like I said, I heard this on the golf course. Someone texted it to us like immediately. Actually, a political staffer for another counselor sent it to us. And I didn't believe it when I saw the transcript. I said, I got to hear this audio because I think, you've heard me the odd time I'll, use some salty language on this show, whatever, always with purpose, right? And so I don't just come in here and like, kind of like just run my mouth and talk like sort of like as Trump would say, this locker room talk. But like if I find, there's an opportunity, we'll call it like punch power for a word to sell a thought or for a word to bring something together, then deploy it. But that's different too, right? We're an independent talk show. This is council chambers. This is an elected representative, in theory, speaking on behalf of her constituents, in theory. I'm not going to try to get too esoteric or read too much into it, but it's a much bigger deal. Jespersen said the F word on his podcast. Nobody cares. Councillor Sarah Hamilton dropped three F-bombs on the record in a council meeting. You kind of go, whoa. So one of the first things I do, I just reach out to her, right? Just because number one, and I'm not trying to be an asshole here, John, but number one, I'm like, hey, you want to come on the show? You want to come Monday lead off? We'll tell Todd Hirsch. We need 10 minutes. We need 10 minutes off the top. Man. But guess what? Sarah Hamilton, as she already told us, is on vacation and does not have internet access. And so, no, she's unable to come on the show. But I said, you got to give me something here because real talkers are going to expect to hear it. So she issued a statement. Says, obviously, this is Sarah Hamilton, obviously it was not the most parliamentary language, but last-minute schedule changes are not easily managed by both staff and council. The cruel attack on her colleagues for having personal commitments that are not easily changed betrays her ignorance of how constructive governing bodies are actually run. Sarah says we sat for 60 hours over the last 7 days. That might be part of it, friends. 60 hours over the last 7 days, so it's not a stretch to understand why tempers are short in hour 60. And without going too much into this, it was the last straw of a lot of straws in terms of the passive-aggressive or outright rude comments, particularly around my family. That from Councillor Sarah Hamilton. So I think I can say respectfully, going a little bit mama bear. Right? She's picking up on, now I'm not justifying, I'm not saying she was wrong. I'm just giving you the information that Sarah Hamilton has given this show. So I said, one more question. I said to the folks saying that this issue, the zoning bylaw, needs resolution ASAP. Many investors, builders, residents are in limbo, you would say, and she says, I agree. And that's why a number of councillors tried to make it a priority at the top of the agenda. Council voted that down. She says it never had to be this way. It was a choice. That from Sarah Hamilton. I will say this. Number one, she's not seeking re-election.
Yeah.
So I don't know that she actually really cares. Number two, while it was unparliamentary language, this was all anybody was asking me about this weekend. And the majority of people, not all, but the majority of people that talked to me about it said that they didn't mind it.
Well, yeah, it can work in that way to get publicity, to do stuff like that. I just feel like after hearing that as well, after reading her statement, like, yeah, a little overworked, a little stressed, maybe a little jet lagged, like, you know, in another place, you know, internet connection's crappy, sick of the same old passive aggressive stuff. Like I said, I don't mind an F-bomb. Like you, I don't mind a little passion. I don't mind, you know, because it lets you know, okay, this person is upset about this. It perks your ears up, right? But maybe the FU, and we've got this meme that's going around now. It's just, maybe the fuck you was a little too far. But hey, she said sorry. She apologized. Like people say the wrong things sometimes. People insult people when they really should just be using the F-bomb to get passionate. But I mean, I didn't hear it and like clutch my pearls. I just thought, my immediate thought was, is Sarah okay? Is she a little jet lagged? Is she having a bad day? So.
Yeah. Vamp Fashion says, I don't see anything wrong with what we're hearing, except maybe that the mayor didn't immediately go to 11 and shame them both. I don't know. I think the mayor was like not expecting it.
No, not at all.
I don't think anybody was expecting it. It's like you don't hear, like there's a lot of passive aggression on this council, you guys. This council is a disaster. And I've said that on the record before, and there's going to be big turnover on this council, and you mark my words. Incumbents are not safe in this election, and there's going to be big turnover on this council. And there's a lot of passive aggression, and I think, like, you know, one of the things about passive aggressive people is like they can get under your skin in a way where your response can be, I won't say disproportionate, but much louder, right? Because when you're sick of passive aggression, you go just with like aggression sometimes. At least that's the way I work.
Yeah.
And but to like deploy F-bombs like that, to straight up say fuck you to another counselor, like across the table, that's crossing a bridge. Like, that is taking it to a whole other level.
I agree. And I think in this day and age, it sounds silly, but we do want a little bit more professionalism, right?
Yeah.
We do want to keep things, we want cooler heads to prevail, especially in like meetings like that.
Yeah. Ken says, I admire Sarah for stepping forward and being a counselor, but it's totally unacceptable. We can't give up decorum in politics. It's led us to a mess in politics. Jill says passive aggressive women are bleh, and then she has the puking emoji. She says the woman who swore is also sick of the other one. Sarah's sick of Joanne Wright and that passive aggressive shit game. Sharon says this is why they stopped showing St. Albert City Council meetings. It became the weekly drama on Shaw Cable.
But I like a little, we've talked about this before, I like a little drama in the house. I like a little drama during meetings like this.
Yeah.
But there's still got to be a line, right? So.
Yeah. Alberta Girl says Sarah ruined the image of female politicians. She sounds hysterical. I don't know about that.
No.
I would say I should find this. I'll punch it in the show notes. Sarah Hamilton came on. She announced exclusively on Real Talk that she was not seeking re-election. And do you remember that interview that she did? Mm-hmm. And she was. It was a powerful. This was the 13th of March. If you want to go back in our archives on YouTube or podcast, that was the 13th of March. The episode's called Sarah Hamilton Wants Out and Yag Wants London. Great title, whoever came up with that title. But Sarah talked to us about the abuse that she's taken in politics. She talked about the emotional toll that politics has taken, and she talked about why she was leaving. And it was actually a really powerful interview. So maybe there's some some insights that can be gleaned there as well. I don't know. For me, some of you are saying, yeah. I mean, the big contributing factor here is that she's not seeking re-election. So, I don't know that this is a big deal. Randy says sometimes assholes need to hear this kind of language, right? Ivana says regular people would be fired for such behavior. Also 100% true. Like, if you're sitting in a work meeting, if you're sitting like around a boardroom table, or like you're having your your team members Monday meeting and you just start F-bombs across the table to somebody else.
This was a Friday meeting in the summer. And Ryan, nobody likes working in the summer. I, in fact, am just so upset that we're here today.
Yeah, me too. That's why we're taking next week off. Tracy says, can you imagine if everybody giving Sarah a hard time was recorded at their place of work and had it played on the internet? Tracy, also a very good point. Others of you say, I swear in the right setting, says Giz. I can find words to say what I need to say with the strength it needs without swearing. Yeah, maybe. Are you one of those guys that says like frick all the time? Cheese and rice? Yeah, you can let us know what you think. 80s Fanify says you can't have it both ways. Allowing F-bombs in an official capacity means those with cooler heads will be ignored, which is also a fair point.
Yeah. Like I said, I like a little drama. I like a little fire. I like some passion. I like seeing people drop bombs on each other.
Yeah.
This one was it just. Like I said, it went from 2 to 10 in a second. I was almost like, what? Did I miss? Was there a chunk of audio spliced out of this? Or
well,
what
obviously,
am I
like
missing?
this is, I just played the clip that somebody sent me. Obviously, you can go back. You can listen. There's council records online. You can listen to the whole thing if you want.
And
you
the
can
other
listen to
councillor,
the half hour before them and time after
I
as well.
agree. Very good at being passive aggressive, but maybe play that back. Maybe be passive aggressive back. That could be like, fighting fire with fire.
So,
right?
like, how would you do that? Like, I would say, she says, well, I would think that some of the other incumbents, didn't she say, would have known that you had to whatever. And then I would say, well, I would think
that councillor could kiss my ass.
Yeah, well, that
would have been a lot smoother, a lot softer.
I mean, you can find ways to blast anybody about anything, right?
Yeah,
I would think that the other councillor with her years of life experience,
there you go,
right? Like, we call her old with years of life experience, would have recognized
that
those of us with young children, unlike this councillor, right, would have vacation plans that would be relatively inflexible. And because we're investing in our family, which I understand my colleague cannot relate to at this moment in time, there's ways to throw barbs without deploying F-bombs.
Mic drop.
I would just say also, this is the type of thing that you can do but once.
Mm-hmm.
You can't do it again.
Well, she's on her way out, so maybe she can.
You know what's going to happen here? Remember, the province, I'm not saying this is going to happen. This is why you tune into Real Talk, for the great insights you're not going to get anywhere else. The province of Alberta does have the power to dissolve elected councils.
Sure.
Right? If this gets to a point of dysfunction, with a mayor who's on his way out, right, with councillors who are not seeking re-election, you've got kind of a scenario here where many of these councillors recognize that they're probably going to get beat in their ridings. I mean, there's big things happening here, friends.
Where is Sarah right now when this was taking place? Where is she?
Well, she's on vacation.
Okay.
So she was appearing remotely.
I would have just been like, I had sunstroke. I don't even remember this meeting.
You're like, you know what, everybody? My
I
bad.
had 3 margaritas.
I was hammered.
I had 3 margaritas. I was in the sun for 3 hours. I do not recall the meeting.
I asked the bartender to pour me virgin daiquiris, and obviously there was rum in them. And for that reason,
my SPF is off.
Yeah, I know, right? Let us know what you think to talk at Jespersen.com. At the end of the day, probably not the biggest issue in the world, but definitely one that a lot of people were talking about, which is why we wanted to pay some attention to it. We've also got an email here from Gillian, an excellent email following a conversation that we had about Lia Thomas, a trans swimmer, competed at the University of Pennsylvania, and there was a big development there. We're going to get to that story in just a little bit. First, I want to remind you, if this summer, if the kickoff to your summer, maybe it's this week, involves investing in a new grill, but you're kind of making these decisions, ones like I just made, like, do we go grill or do we go smoker? And then if you're getting a grill, you're like, am I going to go like old school with the briquettes? Are we going to go propane? Are we going to maybe get some natural gas into the backyard? Like, these are big decisions. You're going to want to have an expert opinion as you get set to up your grilling game. And that's where You Need a Barbecue comes in. This is a family-owned business out in Sherwood Park, run by Russell and his right-hand man, Brian. They do just a great job out there. I first took their barbecue classes, I don't know, it was like 6-7 years ago. And these pit masters have set all of us up to look way smarter than we are when we're entertaining our own guests. They can also advise you on the best grill for your family, whether it's your home, your cottage. They'll even offer the white glove service. They'll assemble it. They can get it dropped off, the whole 9 yards. You can browse their selections online at youneedabarbecue.com. And don't forget, if you pick up a bottle of Unitas barbecue sauce from their store, you're going to get 2 free tickets to K-Days. How cool is that? Buy a bottle of barbecue sauce, get 2 free tickets to K-Days at You Need a Barbecue. Our friends at the ranch, a wonderful weekend. Obviously perfect weather, and the course is looking unbelievable. And I think some people might misunderstand exactly where the ranch is. You know, this was formerly a ranch like many, many, many years ago, but it's not way out in the country. It's 18 minutes from our downtown studio. The ranch is right there. It's Alberta's best public course. And, of course, they're taking tee times right now at theranchgolf.com. They also do tournaments better than anybody else, including the Real Talk Golf Classic, $61,500 raised for charity. No big deal. If you're in charge of getting your golf tournament organized, get in touch with Murray and Adam and the team at The Ranch. Nobody does it better. Again, they're at theranchgolf.com. And we're getting set to celebrate some big news with our friends from UCAN Youth Services. It's their news to share. We'll be happy to amplify it. But there's a big reason why we're so proud to shine the spotlight on this nonprofit charitable organization. They're helping young people out of harm's way and onto a path of economic independence. They do that through a number of different programs, including their Verto Project, which is a pre-employment program for young people aged 18 to 24. If you know someone in that age bracket, maybe running with the wrong crowd, maybe in and out of problems with the law, but they've got a ton of potential. They just need someone to show faith in them. They need an opportunity. They need a door to walk through. UCAN could be an incredible fit. Their life could change with a referral from you, an engaged audience member, a good friend or family member. You can learn more by checking out UCAN online at ucan.ca. Goose says that infill thing has people pretty fired up. Ever since we did that episode on it, man, I would say we've been getting probably two, three emails a day on that from people.
People are so lucky to be mad about their infills. I wish I had one.
That's a big deal. It's a big deal, though, for a lot of people.
I know.
I had a conversation. I want to share this on a future episode, not right now because it's a bit of a long story. But this guy who's I'm just going to cut to the chase, a wealthy guy, huge house, is a big supporter. He approached me. He had listened to our episode. He comes up to me and he's telling me this story about how he says, here's why I support eightplexes in neighborhoods. And I was like, oh, what? Because he would seem to be the opposite. Like, it seems like it even surprised you right there, right? But he kind of laid out his argument, and I'll do it on a future show. It has to do with oil tankers and pipelines and all kinds of stuff. But it was a really interesting insight. I want to encourage all of you that here are episodes in passing, even if it was 3, 4, 5 months ago. We know some of you, we got an email yesterday about our menopause episode, which is fantastic. You can always send us an email to talk@ryanjespersen.com. A couple episodes ago, we talked about former Penn swimmer Lia Thomas, University of Pennsylvania, agreeing to prohibit transgender athletes from competing in women's sports and stripping the records of this former Penn swimmer, Thomas, as part of an agreement with the U.S. Department of Education. This is something that Donald Trump really wanted. Penn had entered that resolution. It was on Canada Day, as a matter of fact, July 1st, to comply with Title IX. The university had been under investigation surrounding the case of this swimmer who had become the first openly trans athlete to win an NCAA Division I title, which is obviously an elite accomplishment. Under the agreement, Penn will restore the swimming records and titles of female athletes, the records that were broken by Thomas. The university also, moving forward, will not allow transgender athletes to compete in female athletic programs. It's also is sending personal apology letters to impacted swimmers. We've asked for your opinion on this. Obviously, real talkers feel differently about this. That's the beauty of this audience. That's how real life works. We got this from Gillian. A thoughtful email, and I wanted to read it in its entirety. She says, following the recent news, your discussion regarding Lia Thomas, I wanted to share my views on trans women in sports from the perspective of a black girl who's been involved in sports her whole life, both as a player and a coach. Jillian says, I figure skated, I played volleyball, rugby, and roller derby. And the debate regarding trans women in female sport is a complex one, so I've tried to organize my views under the 3 main areas of concern that I have. Misinformation regarding sporting opportunities available for trans people, the unfairness of males competing against females, and racism that still exists within women's sport. She says this probably could have been 3 separate emails. She says, but there's not been enough female input or voice on this debate on males in our sports. There's a lot I'd like to bring to the table that hasn't received much attention or mention. I'm going to read it, Jillian's message in its entirety. She says, number 1, the misinformation. A recurring argument regarding trans women in sport is that they don't have a place to play or an opportunity to participate in sports. And that is a blatant misremembering of history. Trans women enter this world with all of the opportunities available to males and have competed successfully in men's sports since forever. It's women, females, who didn't have our own leagues or teams until recently. When many of us were kids, there were very few girls' sports teams at school. She says until law changes, similar to Title IX in the U.S., many schools would only put time and money into boys' sports. When I was in high school in Quebec, she says rules changed so that any school offering a boys' team also had to offer a girls' one, and the same sport. And so the junior high that I teach at now finally got a girls' flag football team off the ground a few years ago, meaning we now have boys and girls teams for every sport we offer. And if a student doesn't feel comfortable playing on the team of their birth sex, no problem. We have mixed teams in at least 3 different sports as well. Trans women didn't fight for the creation of women's teams and leagues. They played on men's teams because they had the opportunity and the ability. Caitlyn Jenner is a former football player, an Olympic champion in the decathlon, a men's-only event. What sports would have been available to girls in the 1960s when Caitlyn started as a male athlete? As a male, Caitlyn won herself a football scholarship, attended college where her talent for track and field was identified. At almost the exact same time, females like Bobby Gibb were being attacked for trying to run in the Boston Marathon. Trans women have had more opportunities to take part in sport than any other group of women in history because they had access to everything open to males. Trans women have even had successful careers in men's pro sport, usually coming out as trans at the end of their careers. She says if the argument is that these women don't feel comfortable playing in men's league as their true selves, then it's up to men to do some of the hard work and create a more welcoming environment on their teams and in the locker room, not just to dump trans athletes into female leagues because we're less of a threat and then call that fair. Demanding spots on women's teams after the girls have done all the hard work in fighting for the creation of these opportunities because girls had so few for so long is, in my view, says Gillian, shameful and entitled behavior. She says, number 2, the unfairness. I played rugby, Gillian did, in her late teens and early 20s. She says, I even made the Quebec under-19s team. Though my coach in rugby club, through them, I had the opportunity to play and practice against some of Canada's top female players. Most of the women in my club played on the Quebec senior team, and very few, or she says a few of them actually made Team Canada. Training in the company of these amazing women just about prepared me for the hardest hit that I ever experienced in rugby. When coaching a boys team in London, England, a 16-year-old male student delivered the hardest rugby hit I ever felt. A 16-year-old. She says males are just built different. Does this even need to be said? She says another thing I'll never forget is that after our women's practices, the men would take to the field and you would literally feel the ground shake as the rugby men ran as a pack. She says, so no, you can't just lower your testosterone to play against females and call it fair. Taking spots from girls in this way is wrong and, yes, unsafe at times. And calling girls who complain sore losers doesn't make it any better. It's not just about medals. 5th place versus 4th can make the difference between whether or not you qualify for your next event or even the Olympics or keep your scholarship. So let's please not discuss women who object to losing any spot or place to a male. California came up with a smart compromise by awarding double placings. In other words, 2 golds or 2 4th places if a trans person places in a competition. She says, though this won't work in team sports, it's a start, and it suggests that potential workarounds could be found if we look for them instead of trying to pretend that there isn't a fairness issue when male-bodied athletes compete against females. And number 3, Gillian says, the racism. A few years ago, when discussing the issue of trans women in sport with a fellow educator, a white woman who's a lesbian said that trans women participating shouldn't be a big deal because, black women compete too. Her idea being that black women have a physical advantage in sport, so letting males join is the same thing. Gillian says, what the hell? As a girl, she says, I remember some parents would genuinely think that their kid was at a disadvantage if they were competing against a little black girl or a team with a black girl. But no matter how hard society tries to defeminize black women, we have been terribly disappointing when it comes to dominating men's sports. She says, I'm sorry, but we really aren't men. This apparently needs to be said. And though some of us may be more muscular than other females, that's a result of our ancestors winning the survival of the fittest game known as a few hundred years of slavery. Little black girls who aren't descendants of slaves, she says, fun fact, not all black people are descendants of slaves, are not significantly faster or larger than your average girl, and none are anywhere near as fast or strong as your average male. Post-puberty men enter a completely different realm compared to all women. The unspoken part of this racist idea is also that white trans women should be allowed to compete in women's categories, but not black trans women. If a white male identifies as a woman, I think some folks still think it's fair. But if it were a black male identifying as a woman, I think those same folks would see the situation as unacceptable. We see this a lot with many cases of trans women in sport being white males. Caster Semenya is an intersex black woman who was dragged for filth by the public because of her masculine features and still can't compete in women's categories, yet there's still so much energy out there to fight for full-bodied white males who identify as women who want to compete. I sometimes wonder if I'm the only one seeing this. Gillian wraps by saying, I'll always love and fight for the rights of my fellow humans, of the LGBTQ2S+ community and their children, but they still have work to do when it comes to sexism and racism. Like in the rest of society, privilege continues to dominate when it comes to whose voices they listen to and whose rights they fight for and prioritize. Folks fighting for trans rights in particular, in my view, were too quick to dismiss the concerns of women and people of color, prioritizing white male feelings. And this opened the door for the greatest irony of ironies. Far-right politicians like Trump, Danielle Smith, putting in some rare common sense legislation regarding girls in sport and then claiming to be the real champions of women. This is a political issue where conservatives are doing the right things for the wrong reasons, while progressives are doing the wrong things for the right reasons. There's room for everyone in sport, but fairness has to come first, and female dignity and respect must matter too. That from Gillian to talk@ryanjespersen.com. So you can send us a response to that to talk@ryanjespersen.com, just like Gillian did. You can leave a comment on our YouTube episode. We monitor those as often as we can and try to respond to as many as we can. And of course, as we do, we'll keep the conversation going here on the show. I see already, Emily says, those are great insights there. Others of you are pushing back. That's the whole point. We don't show up every single day for comfortable conversations that don't force us to broaden or try to expand our understanding of issues that are mattering, not just to people, of course, but bigger picture issues that impact things like our political structures, our sports and governing bodies, our communities, our schools, and the like. We know this is an engaged audience. We celebrate that, and we're proud to make sure that we use this platform to help you share your perspectives and move these conversations forward. That's also what Pilot One has done every week. The very first episode of our week, courtesy of our friends at Solar by Kuby, we shine the light on something outside the news cycle. Something, well, basically, that harnesses positive energy, restores our faith in humanity. It's Positive Reflections, presented by Kuby Energy. And I love this one from Pilot One. It's not necessarily a positive reflection, John. This was passed along. It's just 10 things that are important in life. And some of them, well, you may agree with. Some of them you may not. But I thought that this was a great summary of where Pilot One is at. So thank you for your submission. Number 10, if you don't muster the strength to strive for your dreams, you will work for someone else's. If you don't muster the strength to strive for your dreams, you'll work for someone else's. Number 9, the world rewards actions, not ideas. I like that one. Number 8, time with parents runs out. Call them. Number 7, marrying the wrong person can destroy your life. Some of you are like, that is definitely true. Number 6, fake friends applaud you when you fall. Watch closely. Number 5, health isn't your priority until it's gone. Number 4, if you're blaming your parents, you're not growing. Number 3, loud success is often insecure. Real wealth is quiet. Number 2, your job can replace you in a week. Protect your peace. And number 1, most people don't care until they need something. 10 things to think about, 10 things important in life from Real Talker Pilot One, who submitted this positive reflection via our email inbox, talk@ryanjespersen.com. That's presented proudly by Solar by Kuby. Don't forget, you can get a free solar quote today by visiting kuby.ca. Coming up this week, tomorrow, we're going to take a look at provincial and federal storylines with the lead columnist for Canada's National Observer. That's Max Fawcett. Coming up on Wednesday's episode, she's going head-to-head against Pierre Poilievre in Battle River Crowfoot. Nobody's giving Bonnie Critchley much of a fighting chance. Why would the independent candidate throw her hat into the ring in the first place? And what's she going to do to try to give the Conservative leader a run for his money? She will join us exclusively in studio. We hope you'll join us for that episode and more. Make sure you tell your friends. Thanks for subscribing to our YouTube channel and Real Talk in podcast format, and we'll talk to you soon.
Real Talk is hosted by Ryan Jespersen, executive producer Josh Dunford, technical producer John Hicks, general manager Katie Cook-Chivers, account coordinator Lawrence Derlego, human resources Lena Shepard, website design Mike Johnston, voiceover by me, Carrie Skelton. Real Talk's editorial board is Supriya Dwivedi, Ahmed Ali, Brandy Morin, Ann Castleman, Corey Hogan, Harmon Candola, Catherine O'Neill, and Chris Henderson. Member Emerita, Julie Rohr. Real Talk is recorded in Edmonton, Alberta on Treaty 6 territory, the traditional and ancestral territory of the Cree, Dene, Blackfoot, Saulteaux, and Nakota Sioux, home to the Métis settlements and the Métis Nation of Alberta. Real Talk is a relay project. For more, check out ryanjespersen.com.